Hey, and welcome to tonight's PEP Story live show, where tonight we're going to be looking at finding your stories. Talked last night about needing stories. Now we're going to look at where you can get your very best stories to make your speeches really come alive. So, finding your stories, that's the message. Now, remember, we've got 5 key elements to a speech. All great speeches contain them. If you look through TED Talks and if you look through great, speeches of the past, you will find that these elements are always there. There's always a clear sense of purpose. It always draws on the experiences and life experiences and expertise of the speaker. It's a passion. It's driven by passions, and we're going to look at that. And it's a performance, not you don't just speak it or deliver it. You perform a speech, not deliver it. And the heart of all great speeches is always storytelling. And storytelling takes us right back to the beginnings of time, to be honest, because we we don't know for sure exactly what happened sitting around the fires in ancient times as men and women learnt to speak uh, and travel around and move from place to place. But it's pretty certain that people would have told stories. When we look at the literature that's been written down, it's been around for a long time. The oldest known piece of literature that's been written down that actually still survives today, there are a couple of older texts, but they were very much sort of advice texts. But the oldest piece of literature is about 4,500 years old. That's pretty old. And obviously, it's been carved, and it's about 11 chapters, I think. Anyway, it's a poem, a Sumerian poem, and it is a hero's journey. It is the hero's journey. It's the original structure of the hero's journey. It's the same basic plot of every single one of the James Bond movies. It's the same plot for Star Wars, for all the great epic movies where a hero goes out and fights against the dragons or fights against the coming evil. That's the hero's story. And that story has been around for millennia. That's when it was written down. We know there was one written down 4,500 years ago. So in those days when people mostly sat around fire, where information was traveled verbally, where traveling artists, traveling actors would come and perform shows about the history and tales from overseas and other places. This is why Shakespeare was so famous 500 years ago. He told tales and wrote tales, and many of them used the hero's journey. So this is a classic song. Now, I'm not going to look at the complexity of storytelling, and I want to look storytelling in the sense of your speech. And that means we're going to look back. Yesterday, we were talking about the speech structure. And one of the things I said in there is if you think about the E from purpose, experience, passion, performance, story, just think about that E. You've got one plain message, and you've then got 3 key points that you want to make from it. And that's the basic 3 structure. And each of those, you need to try and find stories to illustrate them, because we know from looking at research that people remember stories better than anything else at all. And it's a massive figure. It's like it's 22 times more memorable. And that's research that's been done in Stanford University, Harvard University. All sorts of research has been done, and I might look at this a little bit more over the next few days. But just take it from me, there's an enormous amount of research to support the fact that if you tell a story, the point you want to make is going to be more memorable. Of course, this means that you have a story with a point, a story which illustrates the point you want people to make, the point you want to make, the point you want people to remember. And the best place to find them is in your own life. Don't say, "Oh, I've got nothing in my life's pretty boring." No, it's not. Look at the we're celebrating this year the 60th anniversary of Coronation Street. Now, I know it's got a little bit of OTT now with all sorts, nearly everybody's a murderer, everybody's been in prison, which starts to make it a little bit unrealistic. But for 60 years, they have been doing those everyday stories. And I grew up in a time when, when I was younger, there wasn't any much what television was around, but my dad didn't like it. So we were treated to the Archers every day. A story of everyday country folk. And once again, it was just storytelling every single day. And that's the Archers is still going today. It's been going longer than me. So that's it. So a couple of things to remember about stories that you really must remember. Number one is don't use other people's stories. I'm not saying you can never use somebody else's story. You can read a story in a book and think, oh, that's a good one. I'd like to reference that. And you can reference these. But bear in mind, the moment you start referencing other people's stories, your speech has lost its originality. Anyone can find that story and tell it. But if you want to make your speech an original speech, you need to let go of those. I think most people, when they start out speaking, love to hear those stories, other people's stories. I always get myself caught out in this when I'm running a workshop or delivering a keynote about public speaking. I say, don't use other people's stories. Nobody wants to hear the starfish story. And I'll bet somebody in yours go, sorry, what's the starfish story? I think, no, I'm not doing this. I can't. He said, talk to me afterwards and I'll tell you the starfish story. I'm not telling it to you. There's no way. Everybody knows the starfish story. Everybody tells the starfish story. If you haven't heard it, you need to get out more. Well, I know you can't. It's COVID. But, start listening to more speeches. You'll hear it. It'll turn up. Someone will use it. And I think this is really it. Is it avoid cliche? There are so many stories around which have been around for a long time. Just avoid those stories which have been around forever. Okay, they're great stories. If you're going to find them, change them around, move them around. Find some story in your own life which matches one of the Bible stories, if you like. But don't use the Bible story as the story in your speech because it's not original. It's somebody else's. So find something that makes your story right. You can start to lock onto other stories if you can make it your own, if you can build something of it. But there is another factor about using other people's stories. And this is a problem that affects speakers because very often a speaker becomes very, very popular, very, very well known. And so their stories become well known. I have a couple of stories that I regularly tell. And I have been to events where I have suddenly heard my story coming back to me. No reference, no credit to where it came from. But I know it's my story. I've been around long enough to know that, that story, nobody else tells it. And I think, okay. And that's usually an indication to me that that story is no longer of value to me. I've used it. It's gone out. It's made its point. It's now traveling. It's actually gone a bit more viral. Time to let that story go. Find another one. Find something else that's new, fresh, and original to make the same point. Because the point will be lost. Because the moment somebody thinks, oh, I've heard that story before, switch off. So you don't want that. Okay? Now, bear in mind, we've got this, just to keep to remind you, one message. Your speech has got to have one clear message, especially if there are other speakers. The audience will not remember it. That we just don't have good enough memories. When loads and loads of stuff is coming at us, we can only remember one thing. And frankly, if you go to a whole conference, I've got loads of notebooks up on my shelf there of notes from conferences that I've been to over the past, 20, 30 years. I keep my notes and I sort of flick back through them every so often. I think, oh, gosh, that's a note I made years ago and didn't take any action on. And that's the problem. We don't take action. I want you to take action. Remember what I said is the important aspects of a speech. I want you to remember my message, take action, and remember my name. Those are the three things that I want to achieve at the end of the speech. Because if I haven't, then I'm wasting my time. But I know that, memory, just, what you remember about my speech dissipates. Before the end of the day, you've lost 75, 80% of it. And at the end of it, I know you're probably just going to remember that tiny little bit, but I've just got to make sure by repeating that you get that one thing. So just separate out what we're talking. And when I talk story, I'm talking in the big, broader sense of what story is. But you will hear people talk about anecdotes and fables and stories. There is a difference. An anecdote largely is, and that's the sort of thing speakers use a lot. It's the sort of thing you'll hear on Graham Norton and Jonathan Ross. What those as chat show hosts, what they do is draw out anecdotes from their guests. There isn't time for stories. Stories take a lot of time to build up. A good story, yeah, well, think about it. You sit down and watch a movie, it's a good story. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours just to tell it there. If you want to read a good story, could be a whole week. That's how long it took me to read Lord of the Rings. Okay, these big stories can be really, really big. So a good story from a speaker's point of view, it's probably going to take 15 minutes to tell the story. And I'll come back to why in a minute. So most of what I do are small anecdotes, little tiny stories that I can choose, but they don't have these essential elements of a big story. So, and it's the big stories are the ones that really can work. So anecdotes, personal life experiences, that you can add in. There's usually a bit of humor to them. They make a point. And sometimes they actually involve other people. So it's not just about what happened to you. It's about other people. And I'll tell you one, just to give you an example about how you can bring in this talking about other people's stories and everything else. I was walking through a park one day when I was much younger. I lived in the East End of London. I was walking off at Waltham's Flats, and I was Walthamstow Flats, and I was just walking through the park, and I saw a woman with a young child, and there'd been a tree had fallen down, and somebody had cut off all the branches, and it was there just a big log for the kids to climb on. It was a really good natural climbing frame. And this little kid must have been 2-3 years old, couldn't have been much more, and he's up on top of this log. It's probably more than his height. And his mother wasn't really paying attention. She was sort of looking out at the ducks, a pond nearby. And I saw this kid, and I watched. As I'm walking along, I suddenly saw his body start to swing. I thought, oh, he's going to jump. And I could see his body bracing to make this huge leap. And he made the leap. And just as he made this leap, his mother saw him at the corner of her eye and turned and grabbed his leg. And of course, he fell down, banged his head on the bottom of the tree, started screaming. She belted him and crying, oh my God, why did you do that? And it was just awful. And I thought as I walked past, oh my God, I wonder how many times in that child's life as he grew up, he was about to take the leap, about to do something that set him right out of his comfort zone. And at that moment, even without knowing why, a memory of that day when he tried to take that leap will come back, and he'll think, I'll leave it. Do you see how I can take just one tiny little experience? It wasn't even me. It's just something I observed, something I saw. I doubt the people involved can even remember it, but I remember it vividly. And it was because it suddenly made that point. If you stop people from taking a leap, then you'll probably stop them from taking all the leaps that they should take in their life. You stop people from stretching themselves. So let people go outside, let people go out. As a manager, let people make mistakes, and help pick them up, dust them off, and get back on track. Because unless they make the leaps, they're not going to make it. Do you see how one tiny little story can create an entire speech? I could have made that the focus of an entire 10, 20 minute, 30-minute speech about stepping out of your comfort zones. Now, fables. These are the things that you probably see if you read the animal stories. The tortoise and the hare. That's a typical fable. It's a story about, this. I'm not going to go into the story of the tortoise and the hare. Everybody knows that, bordering on cliche here. But there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of great fables that are told. Some are told as jokes. Some are great stories. And some have the element of story in them. But these are fables, often involve animals, but they have a moral to them. And there's always a strong moral at the end. My story about the boy jumping off the log had a moral as well, but that was an anecdote. And then we've got stories. Now, the one essential element about a story is conflict. There has to be big conflict. I'm I read a lot about writing books. I might one day write a novel, but conflict is a critical part of a story. And if you want a story that's really going to engage your audience, look for something where there is conflict. Somebody wants something, has difficulty getting it. That's the whole element of virtually every story. There is somewhere someone wants something, our protagonist in our story, and there are a whole set of problems, including personal issues, that are stopping them from getting there. And it's the battling through those obstacles to get to what they want to achieve, to get the prize, that makes the story. And it's the essence of a great story. And I'm sure there are lots of things in your life where you've battled, failed, got up, dusted yourself down, had to go on and continue. There are probably times when you've given up. Maybe you'll decide not to now. So that's where we are. So you're looking for stories from your life, stories where there's conflict. And there are a number of areas where you can look. I'm just going to look at a few. The first thing is think about your mission. What is your purpose in life? What is it you want to achieve in your life? What are you going out for? What is there stopping you from getting there? What obstacles have you started to face? What obstacles have you overcome? Because those, I can tell you, are stories people want to hear. If you've got obstacles that you've overcome on your path to trying to achieve what you want in your life, remember what I've said up here. Okay? Somebody wants something, has difficulty getting it. If somebody builds a business and automatically becomes a millionaire and it all goes on from strength to strength and they become super duper millionaires, that isn't going to inspire people. But the person who started the business, went bankrupt, crashed, burned, picked himself back up again, picked herself back up again, pushed forward and made it through, that's the story people want to hear. How you got there. So think about that. What's your mission? Now, I have a simple mission in life: to help create a fairer world. Does that give me lots of scope? A fairer world where everybody has a voice. Two elements to it. It's going up on my website. I've just slightly refined from where it used to be. But can you see, just from that mission, and that's my purpose, that's my mission in life, to help create a fairer world where everyone has a voice. Gives me great scope for all sorts of great speeches and great ideas and great thoughts. And, we can pick up on all sorts of, pick up on resilience, we can pick up on change and all the factors that stop you from getting to what you want to do. But I want to help people get better at speaking so that they can empower their mission. So what we're also looking here is looking at your passions. Your mission in life is connected to your passions. Have a look at your passions. What is it that really stirs your heart? What are the things that make you really want to get up and go? What gets your goat? You're going to find stories there of things that have happened where somebody has clashed with your passions, or where you've achieved something great, where you've gone off and done something. I've got stories about jumping out of an aeroplane. That was a great Toastmasters talk about the first time I did a parachute jump. I've walked on fire. There's a fabulous news story, because I've been passionate about personal development. So I have loads and loads of stories about various different things that I have done. Some didn't go very well. Some went extraordinarily well. I've met some really great people. I've had some interesting experiences traveling around the world. I'm passionate about traveling, so I love that. So I'm going to talk about those. So think about that. And then just look at your life experiences generally. And this is the thing that I recognize, I think that you need to think about. I love the poem. In fact, everybody does. It's the number one favorite poem we have in Britain is "If," and that line: "If you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same." I can recite that whole poem because I've learnt it all. I've even changed some of the words, which is a bit man orientated. So I've changed some of the words to make it a little more neutral, shall we say, gender non-binary. I know I'll get people get upset if you change poems like that, but I did for me, and I recite it quite often, perform it to myself, because there's so much in it, so much richness, and it connects with all of the stories in my life and makes me think about all the stories and things about the things that are important to me. So think about that. If you can meet with triumph and disaster, have you met with triumph? Have you met with the disaster? What are the stories about that? The disaster stories, the triumph stories, they are all part of a great build-up. So write out the timeline. Just put your life down as a timeline. It's a big project, and what you're looking for along that timeline are those moments where your life veered off in another direction, transitions, moments where what you thought was happening, where you thought you were going with your life, suddenly didn't happen. All of a sudden, you went off in another direction, and you think, "Whoa, what happened there?" People who were, I meditate every morning, and I've been doing since the start of lockdown. I'm nearly at 365 days, will be. And I came across one meditation guru, David G. It's on Insect Timer. David G. David J.I. Look him up, come across him. Absolutely brilliant. And here's a man who was, a high-flying investment guru, and changed his life, went off in another direction, and has become a meditation guru, worked with Deepak Chopra, and now runs a center in California. And his meditations really help me. Every morning, I get 25 minutes with David G, and it sets up my whole day. So that has been a defining moment in my life. It has actually changed a lot for me. I've coped with lockdown because I've been able to just be in touch with myself, be in touch with mindfulness and breathing. And it's actually helped me all through. A lot of people are struggling with mental health issues. I've not been having them because of the meditation I do every single day. And I did a speech a few years ago at the Professional Speaking Association, the opening keynote, about extraordinary moments, those moments in time when your life shot off. And I think it's worth going back into your life and having a look and thinking, what was the moment it all changed? It's not the big climax. When I think about the big climax, my first big speech in front of 1,500 life insurance salespeople, that was a really big climax. That was an amazing moment, but that wasn't the extraordinary moment. That was the climax. What started the road that took me there? And that takes me to 1978. To a sales conference that I attended because I just started a new job, didn't know anything about this, and first time I'd actually been to a conference and seen professional speakers in action, and one in particular utterly and completely blew me away. And I started to meet speakers and decided that was what I wanted to do. That's why I wanted to become a speaker. I love the whole idea of what it could be, and that's an extraordinary moment. A conference I attended in America, which resulted in the formation of the PSA. Another just odd little moment. Somebody said something to me and made me decide, I'm going to transition. I'm going to come out. After 50 years of terrified silence, I came out. So think about your extraordinary moments. Think about the moments that have changed your life. Look back, and they're only going to be tiny. There'll be a conversation with a maths teacher, something that happened on the way home, a near miss accident. Sometimes it will be a bit dramatic. Sometimes, it was a near-death experience. Sometimes it'll just be something someone said. It might even be something one of your children said, something your dog did that will just trigger something. And you think, oh my God. And from that point onwards, suddenly your life takes a new direction. And those are really, really fascinating stories that people love to hear. Maybe a health challenge that you've met and overcome. I don't know what they are. You look at your life and look at all of the things and try and identify the moment that your life changed, the moment you started to move in another direction, because that gives you the start. And you can create some great stories. We're going to be talking more about stories through the rest of this week. Join me tomorrow for day 14. Forgot to change that one. And don't forget, if you need a little bit of help, you've got to do a speech, if you've got a TED talk to do, whatever it is, if you're thinking about putting a speech together, just email me. Just talk to me, and we'll arrange a 30-minute free introductory session. Just get on Zoom and we'll chat and talk about how I might be able to help you to become the great speaker that I know everybody is capable of being. I hope you've enjoyed that tonight. Just some interesting thoughts. There is more to come on story, and we start to build some new structures into it. But I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Take care.